It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're continuing our popular SupplyChainRealEstate.com series, brought to you by none other than SupplyChainRealEstate.com. Stay tuned as we'll be featuring a couple of guests that will certainly increase your supply chain IQ. On a quick programming note, like all of our other series, you can find Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts from, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. We'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. So let's welcome in our fearless, esteemed co-host today. First off, Ward Richmond, Executive Vice President and shareholder at Colliers International. Ward, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back in Hotlanta.
Great to have you back. It's been too long. I know we've had a couple of planning conversations and remote conversations and podcasts, but nothing is like having the wolf back in the room with you.
Yeah, that's right. It's good to be back.
Well, we have been following you socially. I know you've had a busy calendar, and we're going to pick your brain on kind of where you've been over the last couple of months momentarily. Joining us as well, Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, supply chain adjutant, and trusted advisor. Greg, good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
It has been quite an eventful morning.
You know, it's just another day, isn't it? Hashtag startup life, man.
Right.
I'm totally mackerel. I don't know if our audience, you know, if you're watching this, you're seeing an entirely new backdrop.
That's right.
Because the power was out at our studio.
At O'Dark 30.
Two car accidents took the power out. So fortunately, we reached out to our friend Paul DeRigo at Saltbox.
That's right.
And as is his business model, strangely, he just dropped us right in here. Yep. So
very agile.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Saved us. He's our hero. He wears a cape.
Yeah, we owe him at least lunch.
Yeah, that's right. But as our featured guest, which we're going to introduce momentarily, stated, you know, this is the industry we serve. People that are used to putting out fires and hitting curveballs out of the park. So, you know, if we couldn't put it together with great friends like Saltbox, I'd be disappointed in ourselves.
You're lucky I slept in this morning, so I can bring some materials.
All
since
right.
we couldn't find anything in the suite. No lights.
So, Ward and Greg, we have a great guest with us here in the studio today, our remote studio here today. Tim Hinckley, Chief Commercial Officer with Radial. Tim, how you doing?
Really well. It's a real pleasure to see everybody. Ward, always good to see you.
Right back at you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we've really enjoyed the pregame warm-ups and the conversations and getting a sense of who you are. I think our audience will really enjoy some of the stories you have and some of your perspectives. So we're going to dive right in a second. Okay. But Ward, bring you back into the conversation.
Okay.
You go from 4 a.m. to, I bet, 3 a.m., working hard, traveling hard, meeting with clients, gathering up, putting your finger on the pulse of what's going on across the global supply chain industry, so you can be that advisor for the folks that you help. And so you've been pretty busy these last few months.
Yeah, it's been a very busy year. I mean, it's fortunate to be this busy, and then at times, as you know, it feels a little sense of overwhelm. I got to Atlanta yesterday, and I'm home tomorrow. And then I'm going to Las Vegas Friday, and I get home on Tuesday. And this is one of those weeks where it's probably overkill as far as the travel goes.
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
It does, and I mean, I have to work on saying no to things, but it's very difficult right now, and I think you just got to strike while the iron's hot and get after it, and it's just that phase of life and that stage in the economy and all of that where things are just booming.
Yeah. You got to make hay while the sun's shining.
For sure.
So if we had to pick, let's pretend this is Supply Chain Sports Center for a second, and let's get some of your highlights. And if you had to pick your top three from the time you were last in Atlanta, so that was, I mean, with us at least, I know you're here regularly. But
I haven't been back. So if I come here, I'm going to come do a podcast.
All right.
Okay. So you know
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Awesome. So give us your top three.
Okay, top three. Well, the first is when I was in Miami in December, right before Christmas. we were going to do a remote with you guys and Grant Cardone.
10X Grant Cardone,
10X,
yeah.
10X. That's why I'm going to Vegas this weekend, actually,
Awesome.
is to hang with Grant. He's doing his Growth Con, his annual business conference there.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that. But I woke up at 3 a.m., and I normally wake up at, you said 4 a.m. I wake up at like 4:30, 4:45 is normal. So 3 a.m. it's kind of messes me up.
Are you doing the Wahlberg workout or something?
Yeah.
I like to get up early and get my workout in, and then I start working at like 7, and then I have lunch. After lunch, I try not to schedule anything. I'll be available if someone needs to talk to me, but I don't perform at my peak in the afternoon, so I like to get up early, start my day, and accomplish all my critical tasks before lunchtime. And then after lunch, I just
Take a nap?
I do. I try to take a nap. No, there's no shame. I don't know. Are y'all familiar with Trammell Crow?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So Trammell Crow is a legendary Dallas-based real estate developer, and actually went to my high school. And self-made man. I went to Woodrow Wilson High School, downtown Dallas, Texas, DISD, and as did Trammell Crow. And I went to his funeral. I never actually met him, but he's such a legend in my industry and being from my hometown and everything. And at the funeral, or maybe even the obituary I read, that he took a nap every afternoon in his office. And I always felt the need to, and then it just became justified. So I highly recommend it. I think it's a healthy thing to do. And along with controlling your schedule and figuring out when you perform at your peak and when you're optimized to go negotiate and make the critical decisions and get it done. So all that being said, 3 a.m. is too early. And I had to get on a plane, go to Miami. I got in a cab. The cab got in a wreck on the way to see Grant Cardone. And, I mean, I'm like barely going to make it with this whole the getting from Dallas to Miami and then to his office in Adventura as it is. So then it's pouring down rain. I got out of the cab, grabbed my bags, walked across the street to a Burger King parking lot, called an Uber, got in. And we had this game plan that we've all collectively put together on how we're going to interview the legendary Grant Cardone, New York Times bestselling author. I think he has 5 million followers on Facebook.
2.5 on Instagram. I know that.
Yes.
Right?
So if you don't know, maybe it's 2 million. I don't know. But if you don't know Grant Cardone, he's kind of a big deal.
If you're in the retail or real estate business, right?
Oh, yeah. It's self-made billionaire and really, really cool story. But we had an interview that we had a format we'd come up with where the three of us were going to be interviewing him. You guys remote here in Atlanta and me sitting with Grant in Miami. So when I got there, Grant, being Grant, just said, hey, man, why don't you and I just go one-on-one in my studio and we do this? So I'm texting Scott like, hey, man, this is off. So wish me luck. And then we just went into like a 1 hour.
A small world.
Off the
Me
cuff.
and Greg went and ate Burger King when we got that text message from him.
I hope it was a real burger and not that fake stuff.
Because we got in early,
Yes.
and I skipped breakfast.
I'm
kidding.
I didn't have time to eat a burger there.
So this it goes with the territory, as we all know.
Yeah.
I mean, media and digital media, you got to be opportunistic, and of course, the video that you got, the two of y'all interviewing, was got to be one of your highlights of
really life, I would say, especially the business side of life, and just it was one of those things. I was unprepared to interview him for an hour, and then I
thought it was great
and be on right. So
it's like pulled Dan Rather. You did a great job.
Wait, when I was like 10 minutes in, I just said a quick little thank you to the man upstairs and said, I'm on right now. So thank you for that.
So now you know when your productive time is.
Yeah, that's right. It was a good thing it was early. But yeah, it was really cool. And I mean, I think we between Facebook and YouTube, it has close to 100,000 plus views. I've been getting emails from people around the world about it, and it's been that was definitely a highlight of closing out the year that way. And then what else? I went to Ben Gordon's BGSA Supply Chain Conference a few weeks back in West Palm Beach.
Nice place.
That's the. I mean, it's the best. It's the best hotel in the U.S.
So you went there, and I went to NRF. You got this backwards.
No, dude. I told you needed to go. So. And I think our next podcast that we're doing, Ben Gordon is going to be our guest. So I'm looking forward to that.
Wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, he is and he's just an expert in the supply chain realm, and we've become really good friends. This is my 4th time to attend that conference. Okay. Yeah. It's a small conference. Lots of C-level executives are there, and just wealth of information. I mentioned in our pre-show catch up here that I got to meet Brad Jacobs, and on the plane ride out there.
So Grant, for our audience that's listening, we've got Grant Cardone was number 1. We've got Ben Gordon number 2. That conference number 2, and now as if that wasn't incredible stretch enough. Now we're talking number 3. Throw highlights Brad Jacobs.
Which
is
XPO.
President CEO of XPO, right?
Yeah.
Serial entrepreneur, multi-billionaire, self-made.
Self-made. Also, Brown University. He didn't graduate from Brown, but he did attend Brown. He told me that the classes were just too big and kind of. It's not. He basically was like, I needed to just get going, and I mean,
he did.
He did the
Oil
Steve
trading.
Jobs, Bill Gates, and that's. So maybe that's it sounds like that's a strategic way to get going in life, is just get going right when you're ready. And he's proven to be extremely successful at that. And I was in meeting Brad. I knew he was going to be there at the conference. I've never really been in the same room as him. And I didn't want to be the guy waiting in line to talk to Brad Jacobs, who is like at a supply chain conference, like George Clooney, in the room,
Hollywood,
right? Yeah,
Oscars,
Hollywood. The Oscars. So Brad was sitting there front and center throughout the entire, especially the first day of the conference. And I was watching him, and he was so focused on the speaker. He never once looked at his phone. He was taking notes, and he was just laser focused. And then I saw a window to go up to him and not have to wait in a line and kind of be like that, the annoying person waiting to talk
wants his autograph. Right.
And I am a huge fan of his, and I just look up to him, and I think what he does in the supply chain world, which is my world, is just incredible. What he's built with XPO, and just such an interesting guy. And I've never met him, so I found this window. I went over, and I actually had 3 different conversations with him over the course of the weekend, and every time he's just laser focused, dialed in. He's not looking over his shoulder. And you can just tell that that he is an extremely focused guy, and just treats everybody with the utmost level of respect. So that was really cool for me, and being the supply chain nerd that I am, that was pretty cool. So those are I guess Magic 3 highlights.
I love it. And the hits are going to keep on coming, because number 4 we get the chance to interview Tim here in person on your visit into Atlanta, and we've got some great stories and some insights from Tim that he's going to share that we've already gleaned in the pre-show conversation.
And I'll tell you, I met Tim at a conference too, fairly randomly. I think
he stalked me too. Let's just be honest. He was stalking.
And I don't want to tell the story, but I mean, Tim is like the Brad Pitt of a supply chain conference. So same thing happened.
I don't know about that.
No,
pretty impressive. We were up in Chicago for Armstrong and Associates. So I was asked to. I've known Dick Armstrong for a long, long time, and I knew Evan as well as son, who's now taken over the business. And so they were kind enough to ask me to be a panelist and speak, and then he did come on up to me and attack me, but I was willing. So, and it's been good ever since. So I've got my little Collier's Yeti.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
He's very smart about getting you something that you need in Atlanta in the summertime when it's hot.
Yeah,
right. Give me something that keeps that beverage nice and cool.
Right. Or Boston in the wintertime when it's cold.
When it's cold,
keep it cold.
You got your Starbucks there. I'm trying to avoid caffeine today. I'm already hyped up enough normally, so before the podcast, I'm like, don't need that. But yeah, so that's where we met, and and we've been in touch ever since, and it's been a real joy because Ward's been, he's a super knowledgeable guy in the industry, in the space. He's been able to provide me some good insights, and hopefully I'm being reciprocal in a relationship.
Definitely.
No doubt.
We're glad to have you here and glad to have Ward back in Atlanta. So, Tim, let's dive right into learning more about you. And as we talked about before we went live here on the front end, we want to give our audience a chance to do what exactly what we were able to do. We were able to get a sense of who you are, Tim Hinkley, the person, before we start talking shop and business and industry. So tell us about where you grew up and give us a skinny on your upbringing.
Sure. Well, it's nice, Scott, and thanks for having me here. And the fact that I'm still able to have this after we had our pre-meeting is positive.
You passed the test.
I passed the test. You didn't ask me to say, well, we have a technical difficulty. Power's out. It's not working right.
Another poll.
We'll reschedule. I'm an Army brat at heart. So my dad was in the Army. I was born in Fort Leonard Wood Army Base in Missouri, not too far away from me in Kansas there. Moved around quite a bit, and then my dad went to work for a company called Owens, Illinois. So what was nice is my mother was from Oklahoma. I'd spent my Oklahoma out on ranches and when the gas industry was booming. Yeah. And then flopped around with my dad in a lot of major cities, part of corporate life. So it was kind of neat. I got to ride horses and shoot guns and drive trucks when I was a young kid, well before, it all being legal back east. And then, I'd come back east and you'd look like a little guy from the city, right?
Did you have overalls? That's the question.
Well, I didn't wear overalls, but I would land. There was a wonderful place called Shepler's Western Wear in downtown Oklahoma City. So get off the flight. First thing we do is get Dan Post boots, Wrangler jeans, get the right belt buckle. I had to get the right shirt. My grandfather would outfit me soup to nuts and get my head shaved off because this is back in the 70s where I had long hair, so I'd get the crew cut and just look like every other kid except, I never did get a knack for the red man and the skull. Just couldn't do that. But other than that, drank my Coors beer, I think at the ripe age of about 14 or 15, that kind of stuff. So it was good times. And then bounced around a little bit like that. Spent most of my high school and college years in the Ohio area. So Toledo, Ohio, I grew up there, went to Bowling Green. And that was a time when that section of the country was really prosperous and booming. The auto industry was in its heyday. Yeah. I think Detroit was close to a couple million people in population. Toledo was a tier 2 city for all the automotive guys. So you had Champion Sparkplug and Libby Owens Foreign Glass. I mean, it was everything. So it was a bright time in many ways because you saw all these jobs and how good the economy would be. And then by the time I graduated in the early 80s, the economy had just completely collapsed. Unemployment was in excess of 20%. I was working for a couple companies, worked my way through college, which was interesting. That's how I actually got into this business, ironically, without knowing about it. A friend of my dad's worked at UPS. His kid did. And so he got me a job there loading trailers from 4 to 8 in the morning. Unbeknownst to me, it just worked its way from there. So it's if you've ever watched Steve Jobs' Stanford commencement speech where he talks about patching the dots together, if you haven't, highly recommend it. Steve Jobs' Stanford commencement speech, but real eye-opening for me because I listened to that when I came on out, and you start looking back and you go, it all made sense. I worked at UPS, sorting the boxes. I worked at Radio Shack, paying my way through college. If you remember those days. Oh, yeah. Boom boxes and electronic parts and stuff. And this is in the day where you actually merchandise a store. As a store manager, it was your job to manage the store, manage the inventory, know the turns. And I remember talking to my dad because I felt kind of defeated. I graduate college and I go back to working at Radio Shack where I'd worked during college. And, I'm like, wow, I'm not making a lot of money, and it wasn't a job that most people aspired to, if you get my drift. And my dad had some great words of wisdom. He goes, let me understand this. You hire people, you fire people, you merchandise a store, you're in charge of the P&L, you do all this. He goes, I was like in my mid-30s before I was able to do all that.
Good point.
Right? And he goes,
that's cool.
And he goes, you're a general businessman, and you don't even know it, and it was a good life lesson for me. Yeah. That gave me a lot of confidence, made me look at things a little bit differently, and then I worked my way through a bunch of other companies, and ultimately landed at a little upstart company called RPS back in the day. So 1986. Roadway Package System. Yeah. So good friend of mine. Roadway was in Akron. I was living in Toledo. So one of my best friends, he went to Wittenberg, graduated with some people that had connections to Akron. recruited me for a couple of years, to come work for Roadway. And I said I didn't go to college to work on a dock with a bunch of union guys. That's not my idea. Radio Shack seemed better than that at the time. But in '86, I had moved east for the Massachusetts Miracle. Jobs weren't doing well. Actually, maybe closer to 85. But
Massachusetts Miracle.
So the 128 loop, for those that you don't know, there's a loop that goes around Boston called 128. That's the route number. And in the day, all the hot computer companies were there. It predates Silicon Valley, and literally Digital Equipment and Wang and all these great companies. And I got hired by a division of Allied Signal at the time to come on out. And these great, it was really fascinating how you look at this stuff. So we had a company called Neptune Water Meter Company, which was out of Alabama, made brass water meters.
Still there.
Yeah. Okay. Allied Signal bought them. They found these really smart kids at MIT that said, hey, we can monitor those meters via satellite TV, cable TV, telephone lines, RFID even in the day. This is way back.
When was this? This is in the 80s?
This is 1984 and 5.
Wow.
Time range. I mean, this predates all kinds of stuff.
I was still
you weren't
drinking
born.
Coors beer.
Yeah,
I
don't know. But
I wasn't there yet.
No, I know. So the crazy thing is that I'm like, wow, this is crazy technology. And after working at Radio Shack and selling, we called them Trash 80s, TRS 80 computers.
Yeah, I remember.
I was really wound out, and I'm like, this thing could have some wheels, right? I mean, this is technology-wise, it was crazy. We went and were doing this stuff, and unfortunately, after about 6 or 9 months, I can't remember exactly, I heard the word core competence. And so my boss came to me and said, Tim, I know you came all the way out here from Ohio, and how's this working out? And I'm like, this is great. If only the rest of the people could learn how to sell this stuff, right? Because for me, I was selling the heck out of it as well as the guy out of California, but nobody else in the company could seem to sell it because you were dealing with municipalities and unions.
Right.
So I was selling it like, hey, the last time your guy got mugged, the last time that dog bit your guy, you can avoid all that. You can read this stuff. You don't need to send somebody up in the winter months up into that mountain to go read those meters. You can do all that. And, oh, by the way, it keeps all your people healthy, right? Because growing up in Toledo with the unions, I was like, you got to be thinking about these guys. It's powerful, right? But unfortunately, nobody else could figure it out. I tried to be an entrepreneur. I found a roommate that I was with had some money. His family had money. And he introduced me.
It's always a good way to start.
Well, it was a great entryway, but unfortunately, I also learned about big business. So I went to my boss, and I said, well, how about if you're going to get out of the business, is what I understand. I'm going to be out of a job, but I believe in this stuff. So I'll buy the technology, and we can pair it up to your meters, and I'll just take it over. And they said, yeah, no, we're not going to sell you the patents or the rights. And I'm like, but you're out of the business. Why wouldn't you sell that to me? I'm like, how much more money do you need? What do you think the valuation is? So I brought in these smart finance people that were related to a friend of mine, and basically Allied Signal said, no, you don't understand. We just don't care.
Right.
Right? It's just
it's a rounding error.
It's a rounding error. So we're just going to park it. So we're not going to sell it to you. And I could never understand that. And to this day, I don't understand it. And
how old were you then?
Oh, I was young, so maybe 3-4 years out of college.
Yeah.
Right? But it could have been
That's
really
pretty
cool.
amazing that you're having these conversations at 25 years old or however.
But the crazy thing is if you look today, all these years later, that's exactly how this stuff works, right?
Yeah.
So it was, and so those kids at MIT were smart as heck, and so what it really taught me is it's not necessarily about the idea, it's how do you commercialize the idea. Right, and we saw that in my lifetime because I saw it with Steve Jobs and Microsoft, and they basically took a lot of Xerox's stuff and merchandised it and packaged it. And
it's the execution of the idea.
The execution of the idea. How do you commercialize it and execute on it? So similar to your podcast story that you were telling me, Scott. Right?
Absolutely.
So very, very fun stuff. But that's how I got into the business. And got recruited by my buddy. I got tired of what I was doing. I was between jobs, and I said, hey, let me get this. You're going to go against UPS. Nobody has ever succeeded against UPS. They're hugely profitable, hugely funded, and you're going to do this out of this little tiny thing. And I said, that sounds like a fight I want to be part of.
Yeah.
But I was terrified, unbeknownst. And, so I'm like, hey, you offer me good money. It sounds like a great fight I want to be part of. But I actually drove 120 miles round trip from Boston down to Seekonk, Rhode Island. Because I wasn't sure if the company was going to be around, and I had subsidized
rent. So you didn't want to move, right?
Well, I had cheap rent in Boston. Yeah. So if I got really tired, Roadway was known for having a lot of guys out of the Army. So it wasn't unusual for me to set up a cot, And when I read a lot of the startup stories, these companies in California, I'm like, I did that, only I was in trucking.
Yeah.
Trucking just wasn't sexy.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't fun or cool, but it was really neat. We weren't very good at what we did. You'd sign up 2-3 accounts, and you'd lose 1 or 2 of those every week. You unloaded the trailers, loaded the trailers, so you learned every facet of the business in those early days. So it truly was entrepreneurial, and I still remember when we made it to $1 billion, which was the fastest company in its era to reach $1 billion.
How fast?
It was.
Give us an idea.
Less than 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, like maybe 5 or 6 years. It was fast, really crazy
Wow.
fast. And then FedEx actually exceeded it.
That's when $1 billion was $1 billion.
$1 billion was
That's
a big
right.
deal. So, and what people really don't realize is if you take the LTL market today, right? Hundreds, the top 10 companies. Once you take off like the top 2 or 3, they're sub-billion. They're all in the maybe $300, $400, $500 million range. So even in today's world, in transportation, warehousing, these are big companies. So the company I'm with today is $1 billion, approximately $1 billion in sales.
And so real quick, because it looks like we're segueing into the Radial story, right?
Sure.
So
Are we? I
I
feel
don't
like
know.
there's so much more he could tell us.
Well, what would you like to know?
I got to tell you, can I?
Please.
Before we do that, I got to tell you, your level of introspection over your career is amazing.
Thanks,
You've
Fred.
got me thinking about things that I realize how shallow I am.
It's connecting all
little-
those dots,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And
And
from Radio Shack to UPS
Yeah.
and everything that goes with it. And
how little I think people kind of internalize that. But the story that you've told here is really very logical. The progressions. Here.
But I didn't know that at the time. At the time, it
But you
looked
know
like
it
a
now.
hot mess. I do now, and in fact, it was like I said, I watched that Apple video
Yep.
of Steve Jobs, and that's where it all clicked for me. But if you talk to my mother, she'd say you've just been a hot mess most of your life.
Yeah, you just went off into the wilderness.
Well, I went off to college, Bowling Green, so that was interesting because the reason I went there was there's 3 girls for every guy because it was a teacher's college and it was cheap, and I was paying my own way through college.
I've never understood why Bowling Green's colors are anything but green. Right?
Yeah,
Brown and orange.
It's
right?
brown and orange, and it has a bird. So here's
Yeah.
the funny thing: it's
Yeah.
brown and orange, and it has a bird. And then I went to Auburn; it's got a bird,
Right.
And it's got orange in it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, something's going on there. So it keeps being drawn back and that kind of thing. So we'll deal with it as it is.
Wonder you're not in air freight.
FedEx bought us, and I was in air freight.
There you
so
go.
I did heavyweight air freight with FedEx and a lot of other stuff. But So thank you for the kind words and the
it's
introspection.
Fascinating,
It's
really.
always interesting.
So tell us about Radial. Yeah.
Sure.
Where were you before Radial? And
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. And I have some history with Radial, so I'm really interested.
Yeah, so kind of interesting. Spent approximately 30 years at FedEx, mostly on sales. Worked at just about every operating company they had. Took a lot of lateral roles. Was either partnered with or worked for. So I worked for RPS. Then FedEx bought them. Became part of a part of that sales group. FedEx bought what's now FedEx Trade Networks. So I helped. I was responsible for that relationship. So I was part of FDX, the holding company, for a short period of time during the merger of the two companies. So I did a lot of jobs, and I finished off in the global account program. So I helped start that up at FedEx under the leadership of some good folks, and went to the international side because even though we were told we were large accounts and worldwide we called it, the reality was we weren't international. I've never lived anywhere internationally, but that was the closest thing you could get because I went to a ton of countries. FedEx is in 220 countries and territories. I went to a ton of them, and that's actually what prepared me for what happened. So I kind of got to the point at FedEx where it's like, I don't know what else to do. I'm not a good old friend from Memphis, so I probably wasn't moving to
There's a
Memphis.
ceiling there, right?
The interesting thing about Memphis and FedEx is the reality is FedEx is a southern-based company, and to get to the right levels, it helps to be in Memphis. And my wife and I had been living in Boston a long time. She's a Southern Connecticut girl. And we really had no interest in going to Memphis. It's just
but Boston and Memphis are a lot alike, right?
Yeah.
The barbecue is really good in Boston.
So I convinced my wife to move with me to L.A. That was hard enough. To go to Memphis just wasn't on the list.
That was not going to happen.
Not going to happen. We almost moved to Ohio on 3 different occasions back during the Roadway Global Air days.
Back to Toledo?
No, Akron.
Okay.
Akron, Hudson, Ohio, because there was Roadway's headquarters was there, so I was talked about a job going back to their headquarters at one time. I was talked about Roadway Global Air, which was based there, and then ultimately Caliber Logistics. So I did work for what was Roadway Logistics, became Caliber Logistics for a period of time.
Right.
So we almost moved there, and then before I signed the papers, I said, you got to sign a piece of paper that says if we sell this company, then you got to move me back to wherever I want and guarantee me a year's salary. And my boss didn't do it and refused, and I just had that weird vibe. So all I can say to the listeners out there is if your heart's telling you something, your gut's telling you something, better believe it.
Listen,
listen, man.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So sure enough, on Monday morning, there was announced, FedEx has bought, Caliber. And, by the way, everybody that was in Ohio needed to move to Memphis. So I would have just moved there, then tell my wife, now we're moving to Memphis. Wouldn't have gone well. So anyways, went to work there. I was not a good student. I was a Sigma Nu, and I was a social chairman, if that says anything to you. So I had a really good time in college, was not a very good student, certainly not focused, but I had a lot of fun, and that's all I really wanted, to be honest with you. And since I was paying the bill, that worked. And in those days, C's got degrees, and nobody really cared. I mean, that was, if you graduated college, that was a big deal.
Brad Jacobs just stopped going, and look what happened to him.
Well, I wish. So I didn't know about those stories back then. But anyways, I decided to be a good dad. I had a son. I could see FedEx was kind of tapping out. I thought the end of the runway was there. I'd done just about everything, and I knew I could do more. My older son was going to get ready to go off to college, and I said, hey, why don't I go get an MBA? My wife showed me on a couple of jobs I was looking at. It said MBA preferred. And she goes, what are you going to do if you don't get the job? And they use that as a checkbox to delineate you. And I said, hey, I'll try to be a role model for my older son. So at the ripe age of 50, I went back to Auburn because they had a nice balanced program. It was part on school and part remote, and I was traveling the world, so the timing worked well.
Wow.
We had all those great schools up in Boston, but they required you to be there on the weekends or during the night, and I just didn't fit my schedule. So I went back. I graduated with a 4.0, beat my son. He graduated with honors and did a wonderful job. He was a much better student than I ever was, and I worked really hard. But it was good for me because it did several things. It gave me a better appreciation of analytics. So analytics were hot. I didn't want more supply chain or logistics classes, but I loved the analytics and the statistics classes. Going back to your early days and forecasting and planning, I could see this is really important for retailers and inventory and things like that. This could be really, really important for us. And then, it's kind of like getting a tune-up, right? How do I take that academia life and cross-compare that? So it gave me an opportunity to be a good mentor to a lot of the younger students and prepare well for my son.
And you're at that different stage in life, so school just takes on a new meaning. It's a lot more. I mean, I find at this stage of life, I really am passionate about learning and reading and all of that. And when I was in college, same. I mean, I was social chair of.
Weren't you a linebacker too?
I played football, and then I was social chair of the rugby team after I quit playing football. So I mean and then rush chairman of my fraternity, and I made
fraternity.
Maybe that's why we get along
Sigma
so well.
Chi.
Sigma Chi. You were my big competitor.
Miami Triad.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now we're kicked off campus at Brown, and I don't know that they're coming back.
It happened after my stewardship.
It's hard to be in a fraternity in 2020, I think.
It was hard back then. So I remember watching the movie, National Lampoon, and I'm like, yeah, the dean and I were on a personal name basis. Probably not for the right reasons. But it was good times.
I heard it was hazing, and I just don't think.
We didn't do that. Sigma News were against hazing.
We didn't really either when I was there, but I think that the definition of hazing in 2020 might be a lot less than what it was in 1996 when I was pledging a fraternity.
I don't want to get us too distracted, but you might be amazed. It's actually far worse than I ever experienced in the 80s.
Yeah, the binge drinking is out of control.
It's like they've regressed.
I think you're
very
right.
involved with my fraternity, and it's like some of the chapters have really regressed.
And that's why
that's
people have gotten into really bad situations, unfortunately, right?
They need a kick in the ass is what they need.
Yeah. But they'll get there.
They're going to get it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they are going to get it.
But back to the show.
Yes, sorry.
Scott.
Sorry.
We're
covering everything.
Yeah,
hey,
so
look, these are foundations for people.
They are.
Right? I mean, these are foundations of how you shape yourself and your worldview. So.
Agreed.
All right, so let's talk about
anyways,
your
I'll tell you
career.
well, I'll tell you how I landed here in some crazy
at Radial.
stuff.
Gotcha.
Well, just before that.
Just before that.
So what was funny is, here I go and get my MBA, right? I finally graduate. And while I was on the road, a headhunter from Hasbro Toys calls my wife and says, hey, we know about Tim. Does Tim know anybody? Yeah, is anybody taking one of these calls? Does Tim know anybody that could run the global supply chain for Hasbro Toys? My wife goes, I don't know. I'll call him. So she calls me up and says, what do you think? I said, I don't know anybody. And
you didn't even realize they were asking about you, did you?
Didn't even realize it because for years I had always been one of those guys that just would pass the names, make the connections. Same thing I do.
We do that all the
There
time.
are 100 jobs he's passed on where somebody was trying to get hire him.
So it's kind of funny. So my wife, she goes, I got the job spec, and she says, I really believe this is you. And I went down and interviewed, and it was kind of funny because the guy that interviewed me was a finance guy, and it was a great example of where FedEx was misunderstood, and I'll tie back to why this makes a lot of sense. But, he's like, FedEx, you guys do envelopes. I do ocean containers full of toys from China. What do you know about that? And I'm like, well, we have a $1 billion division called FedEx Trade Networks. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that, right? And so the story went on. Well, needless to say, they hired me. I built a big global shared services organization, modeled it off a lot of what we did at FedEx, from building that shared services organization that we had at FedEx. What I learned is FedEx was very, very good at supply chain. They just didn't know how good they were, and they weren't good at transferring that information to the client. So I was able to do a really good job there. And then I got hired by a company to help take a company public down here. That job, we were able to do it much, much faster in less than 6 months, which is kind of incredible if you think about it. Yeah. And then, ironically, I got a similar call from the folks up at Radial. And unbeknownst to them, I had gotten called by Sterling when Sterling had taken over.
Really?
And I said,
okay.
Yeah, and I had said, I'm not interested because I know how PE companies work. By the way, I just worked for one. Yeah. It was great, for my pocketbook, but it's not a place I really want to invest a lot of time in long term because it's really
there is no long term.
There is no long term, and
right.
I'm getting to the point in my career where I'm just not that cutthroat. I'm actually a decent guy most of the time, maybe.
Can you check him on that?
I vouch for you.
That's
all
good.
right,
That's
there
good.
you go.
For sure.
So Radial called, and I had a few other job offers, but I said, let me get this. So this Belgian company has bought this company since then. You're going to put a lot of money into it. You're going to think long term. You're actually going to become very, very customer centric, which is really the founding principles of FedEx. If you think about people, service, profit,
right?
And you're going to do this thing. And I said, oh my gosh, this reminds me of RPS all those years ago, where we can take this little tiny thing that nobody really understands and grow it into a multi-billion-dollar business because everything's on our side.
Yeah.
Everybody hates Amazon. I love your ABA, right?
Yeah.
Anybody but Amazon. And so nobody really cares for them, the retailers in particular. The space is growing. The demographics are growing.
Yep.
And it's really a complex business. So, what was left when I joined is everything but the front end. Unfortunately, we had the front end at the time.
Right.
We sold
through
it
eBay.
Through eBay. It's now called Magento. They didn't quite get it right, but that Shopify company did.
Yeah.
I don't know what their valuation is these days. They'll probably buy FedEx or
Billions.
something. Yeah, it's tens of billions from the last time I looked. But so anyways, we've got everything from click to door. So very compelling. And we've been turning the story around since I've been there, and it's been super exciting rocket ship ride in the last year and a half that I've been there. So real blast.
It's interesting because I've not that I did business with Radial at the time, but they went through the progression of being eBay Enterprises, which was a front end and fulfillment engine. Then they split it off, like you're talking about, made it Magento. Adobe bought it, and if it wasn't bad enough before, now it's part of Adobe.
That's right.
So it's virtually disappeared. But Radial provides that, and this anyone but Amazon. It's not just hate speech, right? I think there is a legitimate. My argument there is a legitimate space in the marketplace for those companies that provide the facilities and the capabilities that Amazon provides today.
Yes,
because companies want the independence,
yes.
right? They don't want competition from their platform provider, and they don't want this race to the bottom of pricing. That's why you see Nike and IKEA and various brands flooding away. And
they want the relationship with the consumer.
Yeah,
right. They don't want to be, cut away from.
They don't want to be a logistics and supply chain company.
No, but they really, really, really are focused on and where the growth is. And it's interesting for you guys have been around this retail space, and the word retail apocalypse for the last year and a half has just been everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that's just the wrong way. And we just had Pier 1's announcement of bankruptcy, right? Just another of many.
Yeah.
But I would also say it's what people don't seem to get is it's actually retail renaissance.
Right.
So if you have good understanding of retail consumers, consumerism is bigger and better than ever before. We're more global than ever before.
Yep.
And so that creates a massive wave of opportunities for companies.
Right. So we sat down with John Gold in Vegas at the Reverse Logistics Association conference and expo.
Just
supply chain it in.
John is he's our leadoff interview, I believe,
right?
And he
espoused 7:45
exactly
in the morning.
That's right,
in Vegas.
But exactly what he said.
I'm sorry, it wasn't me.
The retail apocalypse.
I promise not to do that to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you go all night in Vegas?
Not that night.
No,
not that night.
But the retail apocalypse is cliche.
It is.
If you look at the revenue numbers, the last couple of years, really strong, especially if you look at them over the last 10 and compare and contrast. And to your point, naturally, like every other sector that's dealing with disruption, the models are going to evolve. And just like consumers, stating the obvious, e-commerce, is 25% of all, 20% of all.
Yep.
Of course, the retailers are going to adjust what they need to serve and grow their revenue, right?
That's right.
So it's not necessarily the apocalypse.
Let me chime in here, though.
Please.
But if Pier 1 they're based in DFW,
yes, they are.
You should see their distribution center. Middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And
they got a nice one in Columbus. It's
obsolete. But I mean, like they had a obsolete supply chain. Toys R Us, obsolete supply chain. Go look at their facilities when they
Sears,
shut down.
who literally invented mail order retail.
That's correct.
Catalog retail.
They owned it.
Which is
they
essentially
which book?
Which is essentially a physical version of e-commerce.
It is.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's more about perspective. It's more about so many of these companies are protecting their old business model to the death, literally to the death,
and
right?
their fear of. When the model used to be to go get free land in the middle of nowhere, given to you by the government, and build a building at low to no cost,
right?
Versus go find land close to the big city centers and spend
to demand and supply
spend $50 million to go set up a new DC next to the rooftops, and that to make that decision, it's obviously extremely hard. But then you look at Best Buy, and they're crushing it. Why? Because they're ahead of this, and they saw it coming. And
they got crushed early.
They did.
They got crushed early, and they've recovered really strongly.
And adapted.
Yeah,
and so much of that I think has to do with their distribution infrastructure and just trying to follow the demand that's going along with e-commerce and the retailers that are doing that and paying attention to it are out there crushing it right now. And they're either some will do it on their own, but the bulk of them are hiring 3PLs to go specialize in the supply chain.
It's right here.
That's Tim. That's the story you're telling.
That's why the future is bright for companies like Radial, because Radial's far more than a 3PL. Not to explain your company for you, but but having had some history there, basically once the button is clicked to buy now,
yes,
Radial takes care of every single thing.
Yeah,
right. And so if you want instantaneous capability to participate in e-commerce, you just throw a website up and you guys take care of the rest. Is that
no, that's a
pretty fair estimation, right?
It's a fact. So Radial, just to give you some statistics, which will amaze most of the listeners.
Yep.
So Radial processes $6.5 billion a year in credit card transactions online. Okay, most people don't even know we're in that space.
Right.
So we're a fintech, right, in today's terms. Then we have 3,800 call center seats, right, where we take the calls. Where's my order? What's going on? Right, and support the brands, all right, and we do that, for a ton of companies. Then you've got the fulfillment centers that Ward talked about. So we've got 21 of those, and they're all multi-tenant. So one of the things that makes us a bit different is we believe that the product lines go up and down, and that you win in this space by multi-tenancy, right?
Right.
So it's fractional ownership, which ironically we've been in for a long time, and now people are going, "Oh, that's cool and
what
neat.
a great idea!
What a great idea!
Has anyone thought of that?
Been around a long time."
Yeah.
And then we can do the final mile, whether that's UPS, FedEx, or the lasers, the on-tracks, and so we can provide that on a national and or a international basis through our Landmark Global Division. Now, that's the infrastructure that people think of us as the fulfillment. We do all that. What people really don't know is beyond that, we actually have a distributed order management system called Radial Order Management. Real innovative. I've got to work with my marketing team to come up with
really
something better than
good.
that. But it's really good. It's so here's the crazy thing is since I've gotten there, we went to the industry experts. We went to Gartner, Forrester, IDC, said, put this thing to the test, and I want to know where we rank. So for those of you out there that are familiar with the waves and the other reports that these analysts do, and these analysts are hard. I mean, they're benchmarking the best, right? And the ironic thing is our order management system came out with the best analytics and the best reporting. Better than IBM, better than Manhattan, better than Oracle. And a lot of people don't know, I'm my own IT shop. So that's my code. We develop it ourselves. We've got our own India development center as well as U.S. developers. And what makes us unique and different in my mind is as operators, we now take all those insights from those 200 core brands that we manage, take those insights, embed that in. So we're constantly looking at it from an operator and a software provider viewpoint versus just the software house, right? So we put $10 million in investment into the software side of the house just for our order management system, and another 2.5 into our dropship software. So we were the first in the market with a product called VendorNet, and we bought that company, VendorNet StoreNet.
Yeah.
That software hasn't been updated in years. It's still the backbone. So if you go to DSW today and you buy a pair of shoes online, pick up in store, that's actually our engine that's running that.
Wow, very cool.
So whether it's Bopus or Boris or all those types of things, we're the engine behind
Tell
it.
people what that is.
Yeah,
so
Bopus is buy online,
especially
pick up
me.
in store.
Tell me what you're talking about over
so
there.
Bopus is buy online. You got to love these acronyms.
Yeah,
So
right.
Buy online, pick up in store.
Okay.
Boris is buy online, return in store.
Yeah.
Right. You can buy online, ship from store. Right, and that's a big deal. So a lot of people don't understand why would we want to do that. We're a fulfillment center. I'll give you a great example. There's a retailer down here in the south part of the country. You may have heard of it. It's called Steinmart. It's out of Jacksonville, Florida.
Of course.
So Steinmart's old school retailer, been around a long time, got a lot of stores. They're in a discount space, a little higher end discount, nice customer service. And so we've been doing their e-commerce for a long time. So we do all those services we just talked about, lots and lots of services for them. But we weren't doing, and they were fighting, well, why would we want to ship from store? Why would we want to do that, right? That doesn't make any sense. So we finally, worked in partnership with them. What I can tell you is, and to your point, Ward, the time from click to door or click to available has now been significantly increased. And our orders with them through that electronic platform are screaming fast, and the space requirements are going down. Now, people go, yeah, is that good for you, Tim? And I'm going to say, yeah, because I can backfill that space. It's already built out for e-commerce. It doesn't need huge CapEx, and we're getting those electronic transactions. So we're enabling our partners to be more responsive to their customers, better compete with what's going on there in the marketplace, and the better part is on a pure e-commerce shipment, when you sell it, it is what it is. On a buy online, pick up in store, you're getting anywhere from a 15 to maybe a 25% lift on cross-sell opportunity.
Yep.
So it's a big deal. So that's why these people are loving this.
And you're generating this value for your customer that then you can go tell that story and get more customers. There's some parallel to what I do there in that if we go figure out that somebody's in, say, 300,000 square feet and maybe 24-foot clear, we go put them in a 36-foot clear building and size them down, and then they're saving that money on per square foot cost. And people are like, a lot of people that are skeptical about having a great real estate provider say, why would you do that? You're cutting your paycheck in half. No, I'm going to go have a story to tell that's going to hopefully 10x my customer base because of that, and then I'm doing 10x transactions, and who cares? I want to be downsizing them and cutting their cost, and it's going to all pay off, right?
Yeah. So the
Good
demographics are all there, and ironically, one of the hottest areas we're seeing is pop-ups for peak season or specials or influencer type things, right?
Interesting.
So you have as much as the market has been hot, there's also a lot of retail space that's been vacated, right?
Yes.
Of a variety of different sizes.
And that's last mile space.
It's last mile space.
Yes.
So if you want the ability to say, I'm going to have a social influencer showing up in Manhattan in 2 weeks, and I want, and they're going to hit Instagram, and I'm probably going to do 100,000 orders instantaneously, and they're going to want that stuff like now, right? Well, we can do that. So we'll partner with somebody like Ward, right? Find that space available for a very short time, might be only 4 weeks or so.
Yep.
Right? Pop that up. We can drop the orders and direct those orders to that zip code, to that location with those items. You got to know your inventory, and we have all the tools to do that, right? Yep. Our order management system helps us manage that. It all links in. And then we can meet that same day, next day demand curve. So we're seeing that, and that's for what I'm calling emerging brands. You're also seeing companies like Untitled, a company that started off as pure e-com native client. And what they've learned through analytics, and these companies, these emerging companies are really, really smart, right? They got all these young kids who understand analytics and data better than anybody, in the past.
They've built the company based on new technology. They don't have any of that legacy technology.
Were they just drop shipping initially, or how does Untucket do it?
Untucket worked with us and other companies before us, but now they work with us to do their distribution. But what was funny is they did put up a store, and when they put up the store, what they found out was sales within that geographic proximity of the store rose for their e-commerce orders. So the last count I saw was they were around 80 in the United States.
Wow.
They're going to grow. They just opened up stores in Europe, so we're working with them over there as well. So this ability to work with these emerging brands and ride their coattails up to great success as us being their enabler, that is a really powerful message. And it doesn't take a lot to get in this business. Like you said, you can get into this business with not a lot of knowledge. If with the Shopify account, you can partner up with sourcing companies in the supply chain to help you source your product. If you're not sure, if you just got an idea, I don't know what that is. Is that a... What is
That's
that
cotton.
That's a cotton.
It's like a local clothing brand.
Okay, I was going to say it looks like cotton to me from my Oklahoma days, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know if it's that or an oak tree or something. But
might be. I don't know.
But
it
my point
like
is
it's the Cotton Bowl, Dallas, Texas.
I agree.
So I don't know if you guys remembered. I always just laughed. There's a little brand that had a little snowman on it. I go out golfing with these guys, and I'm like, I got an 8. I was in the trap, and down in Florida, and, that kind of thing. I'm like, that's a good name. So there is an opportunity for these emerging brands to partner with the likes of Radial or Ward's company at Colliers, or others are like Saltbox, where we're at today.
Right.
To say, hey, how do I go into a shared services type environment, multi-client type environment, get the scale, professionalism, business acumen of those companies, and ride my company up where I want to do it versus trying to build all that infrastructure and overhead ourselves.
So we got to. I want to segue a little bit here because I want to move more broadly.
Sure.
Right out and get your insights on the industry.
By the way, can I point
whole.
out that Scott is the master of the segue and steering these conversations?
He is a traffic cop.
Sure. Boy, I tell you,
I'm looking for his clues.
This would be a 4-hour interview.
Yes,
That's
I need
fine.
some white gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so
you're doing
everyone
good.
can
You
see
haven't
my
kicked
hands.
me yet, so I'm feeling very.
Well, there's some. I mean, going back to Greg's earlier point, there's so much that you've brought up that we could dive deep on.
Well, we'll do it on a future show. How's that?
We're going to kick off a series, a Tim Hinckley series, and we'll go chapter by chapter, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll see if anybody listens.
E-commerce logistics.
We'll have to get him while he's in town.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm here a lot.
So that's good. That's good.
In the winter.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the winter, for sure.
So if you go broader,
Yes.
Clearly we've talked a lot of insights from retail and e-commerce,
Yes.
and some logistics and fulfillment and supply chain behind that. But if you go broader and think of the global end-to-end supply chain universe right now,
Yep.
what else that may or may not be related to Radial that really jumps off the page, jumps off the news stories, jumps off your email or social media? What's really between your ears right now?
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of broad, but I'll
take it wherever you'd like.
All right, I'll reflect because there's some key events that are going on right now. So in a few weeks, for those of, since you said global, I'm going to start back at the sourcing side of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Part of my life, I got to live at Hasbro. So with China situation on the virus, it's disrupting things. We just saw something in the Wall Street Journal today with Apple saying they're going to miss their numbers because of that. And so I'm not sure if people understand sourcing implications and supply chain implications. So as companies were migrating to other sourcing points, China is still a heck of a powerhouse and a ton of product coming out of there.
There's no place in the world that can absorb it. They've already, I saw it last night, a discussion at Wall Street Journal also, where they're saying no matter where you go, there is not enough capacity in all of the combined places, Southeast Asia, South America, wherever, to make up for the capacity of China.
And on that point, we've had a series of conversations this week. Of course, Wall Street Journal is doing a lot of great reporting. Resilience 360 is doing a lot of great reporting. Mm-hmm. The sense I'm getting from a lot of these conversations is that folks think we've already been hit from a supply chain perspective.
No.
It is a tidal wave coming, and I think that's
the closest thing we've had to this is in the automotive industry. If you go back a few years, there was a disruption in Japan.
Right.
And it was the tier 2 and 3 suppliers that just completely fractured the industry.
Right.
And what I can tell you is I've been part of many dialogues and committees on this type of stuff, and very, very, very few companies are capable of building that type of resiliency and still hitting the costs and the time, the market requirements they need.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like this that's going to force companies to reflect. So.
Well, we're a long way from resolution.
We're a long way from resolution, absolutely. So, and then that leads into the second aspect. So I'll put a good word in for another good friend of mine. So there's another company called New York Shipping Exchange. There's a good friend of mine that's a part of that organization. But when I was in that ocean business, what I found interesting is blank sailings, right? So the ships would be there, they'd blank out, you wouldn't pick your stuff up, they would not load you. Things like that, and unfortunately, if you miss it, it could have serious implications.
Yep.
So he came up with the concept on how do you create a liquefied market for futures on ocean contracts. Now, it seems kind of innocuous, but for a guy like me at the time, I was like, we're running a production line for toys for a particular holiday. Well, we test things. Well, maybe there's a production glitch. The dye wasn't the right color, something didn't come out, raw materials didn't get there in time. So all those containers that I had planned to book, now I have no use for those things, right? And I've got a commitment to my ocean carrier, and I'm standing naked, basically, right? And if I didn't have a really good relationship with those carriers,
they charge you anyway.
They charge you anyways, right?
They call that getting ghosted in 2020.
Right, that's right. Yeah. So he came up with an idea and said, hey, I'll build this company, and people can buy futures contracts, and there's guarantees. And, oh, by the way, if you can't use them, you can sell them for whatever the market value is at that point in time, which
container
could be
timeshares.
Yeah, well, so it could be higher or lower, but the point is you could budget. So for me, when I was with Hasbro, I really linked into this, and I said, hey, I see more volatility, not stability, with the compression of the ocean liners coming together. So there used to be a lot more of them. There's fewer of them.
Yep.
And ironically, the loads and the imbalances remain the same. There's a lot of irrationalities in that market. So it's another area on that aspect where technology and disruption is happening. And there's another company that's in the freight forwarding space. It's up in the Northwest, and they're doing it on the 3PL forwarding market. Okay, so what I would say is technology is the core enabler of all this. Business problems continue to be what they are, and it's really, really bright times to be in the supply chain space if you can pair up what you did, Greg, in your past, pair that technology to a true business problem, and the sky's the limit, right? The idea that only a few people are going to own the market is absolutely incorrect. There's disruption that's going to continue to happen. It's happened for generations.
Right. As it should.
As it should. And the agile companies, the ones that embrace this stuff, the ones that acknowledge it, will do well. So if you look at FedEx right now, they're in a world of hurt.
Yep.
For I don't know how many 10K calls I got on for years. They would say Amazon is not a competitor. Earlier this year they announced, or last year actually it was, they announced, oh, well, maybe we now see them as a competitor. And luckily they didn't get in too deep with them. UPS is doubling down. with them. I believe that to be a big mistake. I think they're creating their biggest enemy. And FedEx is faced with some serious challenges. And I just read on the news this morning, Walmart's also facing softer sales. So I'm looking to see, can some of these giants pair together and partner up in a more meaningful supply chain way?
I think Amazon's known throughout the industry also for partnering with folks and then figuring out what they do and then doing it themselves.
Well, and, Amazon's been doing that for a long time in real truth, because in 2014, FedEx and UPS failed them during peak season.
That's correct.
And that's when they decided they would build their own network, and they used their AWS model.
That's
right?
correct.
So
That's
they needed all this capacity of servers to sell books and then other retail, and then they had all this excess capacity. So they sold that off, and they're doing the exact same thing. So my last company, that's what we did. We helped them build their 200 new fulfillment centers they build a year right now.
Okay,
and they've intentionally built excess capacity into these facilities so that they can compete. And at first it was to save themselves from the inability of FedEx and UPS to fulfill their needs, but now they've seen the opportunity. Some years ago I said, and I say it frequently, in a few years, I don't know how many years, one of those three will no longer be in the logistics business.
I'm going to put it out there. I think it's FedEx. So
I do too.
All right. I think FedEx.
Don't tell Kathy Robertson that, by the way. Kathy Morrow.
Who's she?
She's an analyst, big FedEx fan.
Friend of the show.
And she can make a great argument as to why FedEx is not. Actually, she and I had that discussion.
Put me in a room with her all day long. So what I would say is FedEx is perfectly positioned for a merger and or an acquisition with a handful of companies that could greatly benefit, from that environment.
You mentioned Shopify earlier.
I think Walmart FedEx combination would be highly productive. People outside the United States, most people have no idea how big Walmart is. They have a huge international footprint.
Yes.
If you just look at basic earnings of FedEx and you assume that that's now a cost basis, Walmart has a huge trucking fleet.
Food delivery.
It's food delivery. They're into
it.
So if you look at the Express network, the Express network could be in the food delivery business with some minor gyrations. You'd have to change out the truck configurations, but FedEx
You're going to get another
knowledge.
Recruiter call, Tim.
Yeah,
I can feel it coming.
But I'm happy where I am.
And Walmart's got all the store infrastructure too that you were talking about to handle all the fulfillment by store models, and I mean they have
the two would come together quite nice.
So let's.
So that's a couple. That's a couple of big.
Yeah.
Coming attractions,
Agreed.
right? And I think those are really valid insights. We're hearing more and more, Tim, about the woes at FedEx and frankly, management's refusal to acknowledge them as a significant impact on the company, and that's always dangerous. That's the way you wind up being Toys R Us or Macy's or Sears, right?
Yeah, so I mean, for my take of it is look, Radial's a little baby company. I mean, we're $1 billion company by many company standards. That's a big company. But if you look at the space we're in, we're dominated by UPS, right? FedEx, DHL, Amazon, right? There's a handful of companies that their market caps and their sales are absolutely outstanding, right? So I think the advantage here is and why we're doing so well is a lot of companies are saying, how do we partner with somebody that actually cares about us and values our business and wants to be a trusted advisor and not a transaction, right?
You're a hedgehog, too. I mean, look, if you go to FedEx, they might have a service like Radial.
Right.
But they don't focus on a service like Radial. I could literally start, and I intend to, because my favorite brand of clothes has gone away.
Oh, no.
Toys R Us.
Yeah, Toys R Us. Yes.
It's okay. We'll help you find another brand. I'm dealing with a lot of them right now.
Good. Well, I you could literally set up your brand, and that's where retail is going. They are brand and marketing experts.
That is it.
And then have the logistics, every aspect of the logistics. I was glad to hear you guys do returns as well.
Yeah, so we do.
Every aspect of the logistics handled from that point forward, and you focus on enabling those brands.
And let me just say one more overarching theme here that goes along with not admitting when something's wrong. Nobody is going to go to the next level and succeed by winning. You succeed by losing, acknowledging the failure, and learning from the failure, and adjusting and going ahead. But if you just say, we win, we're the best, we win, we're the best, you're going to be in trouble because and Jeff Bezos is like known for it, for constant and never-ending improvement of their systems. And he's never going to just say, okay, we're on top. They're investing billions of dollars into figuring out how to stay on top and learn from their mistakes and acknowledging those mistakes.
Good point. All right, so Tim, I want to make sure our audience knows, as much as we want to book on a second hour to the show today and dive into stuff even deeper, how can our audience learn more about Radial and connect with you?
Yeah, because they're going to want to.
I appreciate that. So very simple. It's radial.com, radial.com is our website. All of our services are listed out there. We're going to be out at the Shop Talk show. So for those of you that are going to be out there, we'd be more than happy to see you at our booth. Myself and our head of client success will be down at RELA, just on a personal basis, floating around. You can reach me at Hinkley, Hinkley, at radial.com. Again, real simple, Hinkley at radial.com.
Easy.
Feel free to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, we'll have you back
as
so 2020 continues to evolve.
Just real quick,
yes.
I need to connect you with Cindy Lago
to talk
at Shop Talk. So we'll talk about that.
And one more thing, we need to bring Tim back, and we need to focus in and maybe even get Brad in here, if that makes sense, and talk about this fulfillment strategy and your 21 fulfillment centers and how you're growing, how it's impacted by the labor market, because this is a real estate show.
Yeah,
we didn't talk too much about real estate.
But thank you for that.
So on that note, Ward,
I like that
not
word.
to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot. If you had just a couple of observations or predictions for 2020, kind of what you're seeing, what your Tim's seeing, any deals you've seen made, just a couple of bold, fearless predictions. And you don't have to get too bold, but what are you predicting?
My last prediction at the end of last year was to look for a little bit of constraint in major CapEx expenditures as
it's going on
there's some major constraints, and people, if people are going to be making big changes, it's because they're being forced to make them and they just have to. But if they have the option to delay, I think a combo of the pending election and the impacts that could have, whichever direction it goes, and then not only, pre-coronavirus, the trade agreement, only phase 1 has been done. Now I understand the coronavirus is going to be impacting China's ability to live up to this pact to begin with, and so even though we have phase 1 done, I don't know if they're going to be able to handle it because of this new crisis. And so what's happening with that and how that's impacting, that's a whole nother thing I'd love to hear your view on, Tim, and just how these retailers that are sourcing from China are being impacted, because I've talked about it a lot. And the combo of those two things, and the fact that we're in the midst of the longest bull market in the history of the United States, and that things are cyclical, and it doesn't stay like this. If you look at the e-commerce growth pattern, it is so consistent, and it keeps going up. There you go. It's right there. And
he does look at it.
But I think it is still in its infancy, so that's great for everybody in the room. And but still, it's been a long run, and that I think people are a little nervous. So real estate wise, they've been building more product than ever. They've been absorbing more product than ever. With I'm speaking about industrial real estate specifically. This is all really being driven by e-commerce, and will that continue? Let's hope so. And I think it will, but I think developers are. Everybody is paying close attention to what's going on in the supply and demand in the marketplace. So I think there's just a lot of conservative, they're being cautiously optimistic. That's the term.
All right. So we know how to follow up with Tim and Radial. Ward, how can folks reach out to you and keep picking your brain on some of these things?
Yeah, so I have my blog is supplychainrealestate.com.
Which I love, by the way.
Thank you. I love it. I built that a couple years ago. We actually just revamped it, so we redesigned it. I have a great web designer that I work with, and he recommended that we make some tweaks to get the speed up. We have a lot of content on there. And
new logo too.
I got a new logo thanks to Scott's suggestion. Scott nicely told me he didn't like my old logo.
Wow! If Scott doesn't like it, that's telling you something.
Hey, let's give a plug for the company that you paired me up with.
He's got marketing props. I like it, man.
What was it?
Logo Attorney.
Was it?
Logoattorney.com.
And I
crowdsourcing
got
site, right?
A cool new logo, and you get all these different designers that throw ideas at you, and I pay I think $200, and we got a really cool new logo, and
I need a new Yeti.
Yeah, I need to order some more Yetis, and but my cell phone's always the best. You text me 214-336-5757.
It always scares me when you do that.
Bold. I always do.
I love it.
Just text me.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you could see the people, like Tim and I text.
We do.
I text.
Yeah, do not give my number out, please.
Don't worry, I'm not, dude. I don't want anyone else to have it but me.
Well,
all right.
This is just a start of our
yeah.
programming here in 2020. We've gotten a ton of feedback, or even though we don't always talk about real estate, we've gotten a ton of feedback on this series between the guests like Tim to your ongoing insights and feedback and hot take on what's going on. So we love it. This is such a great start for 2020. And we look forward to having you back in Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping we get
really
12 in this year. That's
Absolutely.
the goal. So we get at least one a month.
Absolutely.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I love coming out to Supply Chain City. It's like my home away from home. When you're in this industry, there's so much going on here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And it's such an exciting place to be.
Agreed.
And I'll be back for the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards.
That's right.
Coming
10th.
up. March 10th. Is Modex going on?
Modex is coming up as well.
That's the backdrop.
That's the little show tied to the Atlanta Supply Chain.
Yeah, but that's going on the same days, right?
It
is.
So
9 through the 12th.
March 9th to 11, I'll be here and
Okay.
Hanging out with you guys.
Love it.
Far out. We'll
Love
make
it.
sure to have some comfy chairs for you.
That's right.
So
So
if you ever sit down.
This is great. Yeah.
big thanks to Tim Hinckley,
Yeah.
Chief Commercial Officer with Radial. Big thanks to Ward Richmond, Executive
Thanks, Tim.
VP, shareholder at Colliers International. Greg, real briefly, to our audience, be sure to check out events and webinars. We got some great in-person and virtual events coming up with partners around the world. EFT Reuters Events, Automotive Industry Action Group, the Georgia Logistics Summit, DHL Resilience 360, Modex, as you mentioned, of course, the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, you name it. And, of course, if they can't find what they're looking for on that website, they can reach out to our CMO. they're SOL. No, they can reach out to our CMO, Amanda, at supplychainnowradio.com, or hit us on Twitter. Greg and I and the organization's all very active on Twitter. Mine is at Scott W. Luton and
At Gregory S. White.
Yes. So one final
Nothing catchy.
and succinct and Reader's Digest as we start to close
Yep.
right before. Any key thought for the
You're going to let me talk.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Well, look, I think I'm a big fan of Radial. I've known them for some years, did some work with them at Blue Ridge when I was running that company, and I love this space. Look, companies need alternatives from the big players, from not only Amazon, but they need companies that are focused in this industry. Like I said earlier, I see retailers becoming more of what they should have been all along and were in the old days, which is brand and marketing experts. And then they can just hand off the other aspects of the business.
Design
and let somebody
cool sweaters like this from American Eagle that I was commenting on earlier. I mean, but that's their business,
It
right?
is their business, right?
Their business should not be, and especially with e-commerce, you're right. And we talk about specialization on this show every time I'm here, right? And that's the key.
Yes.
Read
Agreed.
good to great. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Read good to great.
Yes.
Right?
I have.
You guys are a hedgehog. You do one thing. You do it better than anyone else in
Thank
the
you.
world, right? And you make your money doing it. So that's I
Final
think
word
that's a lesson.
From Greg White.
I think-
love that. We got to start doing that. We got to do
And you know what? Everyone at this table does the same thing. If you think about it, we're all specialists, and we're all hedgehogs in our space. So
Yes.
that's
Punxsutawney Phil's up in feed.
that's pretty cool. Yeah, there you go.
Love that Groundhog Day reference.
Always
Awesome
get them
movie.
in woodchucks.
I love
confused.
that movie. Never gets old. By
No,
the
it
way.
doesn't. All right. So big thanks again, Ward Richmond, Tim Hinckley, Greg
Yeah.
White,
Great job,
to our
guys.
audience. Be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us on wherever you get your podcast from, including
YouTube.
Be sure to subscribe as we're rolling out new subscriber rewards programs soon. So on behalf of the entire team here, Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.